Hello everyone, I hope you are doing great. So today we'll be discussing about the Norma Laterialis, that is actually the lateral view of your skull, right? As we've already discussed about the Norma frontalis in the preceding videos, I'll teach you about the superior and the posterior view of the skull, and more importantly the base and the vault of the skull, right? So firstly, we should talk about the bony landmarks that are involved in the lateral view of the skull, containing the frontal bone. You should know that, right? That in presence of the parietal bone, here is the occipital bone. This entire pink is the temporal bone. Here is the sphenoid, and most of the part of the sphenoid that we'll discuss in the wall of the skull, the greater and the lesser wing, are present within the vault, right? The zygomatic bone, the maxilla, and the mandible that you've already discussed in the Norma frontalis, right? So these are actually the bony landmarks that are present in the lateral view of the skull. So starting from this point, here is the presence of zygomatic arch. This is actually the squamous part. The temporal bone is going to have the different parts, and with the squamous, that means the flat part of temporal bone. Then there's the presence of a zygomatic process. It's so called because it's attached to the zygomatic bone, and from the zygomatic process there arises a line that is going to move arch backward and is going to deviate into the two lines, resulting in the formation of superior temporal line and the inferior temporal line, right? Just beneath the inferior temporal line, here is the presence of this entire is the infratemporal fossa. This infratemporal fossa is going to serve as an attachment for the temporalis muscle. We can see here this is the presence of temporalis muscle here, right? So the infratemporal fossa is going to act as an attachment for the temporalis muscle. Furthermore, there is between the frontal and the parietal bone is the presence of the coronal suture. This is the coronal suture, and the parietal and the occipital bone are going to have a lambdoid suture in between them, right? And these suture are actually not developed at the time of birth because they're the presence of fontanelles that we discussed about in the not that actually a difference between the adults and the children's skull. Moving further, we can see that there is a presence of a weak and a thin point, the most thin and thinnest point, and a very important objective for the examination is that in the lateral view of skull, here is a presence of a point that is called as a terion, right? It's actually a point where the frontal bone, you can see the frontal bone, the parietal bone, here the temporal bone, and the greater wing of sphenoid are going to unite with each other, and this is clinically also very important because here is the passageway for the anterior division of the middle meningeal artery. Any lateral or sidewise blow or rupture or can lead to the rupture of this artery, and as a result of that rupture there can be an epidural hematoma formed within the skull, right? So it's actually very seriously dangerous if you got a hit on this side of the skull, right? Then moving forward, so if you can see here, there's we were discussing about the zygomatic arch. So after the zygomatic arch has the articular process for the articulation of the head of the condylar process of the mandible. The temporal bone is also going to contain here the external acoustic meatus and the stylar process, but a more interesting fact that I'm telling you here is the presence of mastoid process. If you can see here in infants skull, there is no mastoid process present in the temporal bone. Why is that so? It's actually because at the time of birth the mastoid process is not formed, but due to the action of the sternocleidomastoid muscle, we can see this is the sternocleidomastoid muscle that is going to have its attachment from the sternum and the that's the clavicle, and to the mastoid process. Due to the progressive action of the sternocleidomastoid process, there would be a formation of hair from the temporal bone. A mastoid process is going to emerge, and this is basically a very important fact to know, that the mastoid process is not present at the time of birth but arises later by the action of the sternocleidomastoid muscle, right? Then there is a presence here of the mandible as well. You know that the body of mandible and the two rami are also present, just for the sake of revision, and the maxilla or the zygomatic bone. And the zygomatic bone is also going to contain the zygomaticofacial and zygomaticotemporal foramen, and there will be the presence of here is the infraorbital foramen that leads to that going to act as a passageway to the infraorbital nerve and the vessels, right? The important fossa are then present in the lateral view of the skull that are not actually visible like that way. It's going to contain a infratemporal fossa. As we discussed about, this is the temporal fossa. So just beneath the temporal fossa is the presence of infratemporal fossa, and just lateral to the infratemporal fossa, if you could see in this diagram, here is the presence of the pterygopalatine fossa, right? This is the pterygopalatine fossa here. The pterygopalatine fossa is also very important according to its contents and the boundaries. Through the pterygomaxillar fissure, the pterygopalatine fossa is connected to the infratemporal fossa. These splenopalatine foramen is going to connect the pterygopalatine fossa medially with the nasal cavity, and the foramen rotundum is going to connect it with the cranial cavity. We'll be discussing it about the foramen rotundum in the base of the skull and the vault of the skull, right? The inferior orbital fissure that is present here within the orbit is also going to is basically connected with the pterygopalatine fossa. So this pterygopalatine fossa is going to play a very important role according to the contents as well, because the major contents of the pterygopalatine fossa is going to include the different arteries, the different nerves, and most importantly the maxillary artery, maxillary nerve, nerve to the pterygoid canal, and the pterygopalatine ganglion that is going to give the branches to the different and several different type of the nerves and arteries present there. So and if we talk about the maxillary nerve branches that are present here in the pterygopalatine fossa, there are many branches. Importantly, the middle meningeal nerve, the greater and the lesser palatine nerve, the nasopalatine nerve, the zygomatic nerve, and the infraorbital nerve, right? Similarly, the mandibular branches are also here, that is the buccal nerve, the lingual, inferior alveolar, and the auricular temporal nerve. So these all should be learned because it plays a very important part in the contents of the pterygopalatine fossa. So this was today about the lateral view of the skull, and in the next lecture we'll be discussing about the superior and the posterior, but that's only a little bit of the part. And we'll try to discuss about the rest of the structure. The vault of the skull is a very interesting video. You need to watch because I will be discussing about with a two proper skull. So that's it for today, and I hope that you all got it very well. Thank you for supporting. Thank you very much.